Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News. I am Mtsolo Omorwan.
And I'm Rufai Husseini. When Nigeria took a principled stand against the apartheid regime of South African government, the sustained pressure against apartheid led to the dismantling of the white minority rule in 1994, giving way for black majority-controlled government in South Africa.
And Nigeria, being the largest market on the continent of Africa with a rising middle class, has had a fair share of the presence of South African companies in the country. At present, there are at least 134 South African companies operating in Nigeria.
However, concerns that Nigeria's gestures have not been reciprocated by South Africa and its citizens has culminated into unnecessary rivalries, contestations, and suboptimal relationship that exists between Nigeria and South Africa at the continental and global levels. This rivalry has generated a lot of concerns, especially by the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, who has issued an ultimatum to South African companies to leave Nigeria in 7 days in the aftermath of killings of Nigerians living in South Africa.
Well, joining us to discuss the relationship between Nigerian and South African students in the light of various developments are Misheck Mugabe, President, South African Union of Students, and Lwandrie Mtsolo, Secretary General, South African Union of Students. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. Great to have you. Let me just begin by asking you, I'm sure you've been following developments in recent times, and your thoughts and reactions to the ultimatum given by your Nigerian counterpart to South African businesses in Nigeria.
Okay, let me start. Thank you very much for having us here. And we are very glad to be in Nigeria. It's my first time to be here.
Great.
And I think that on that note, we saw the Nigerian National Union of Students outlining that they are not happy with how Nigerians are being treated in South Africa, and therefore all companies that are in Nigeria must be evicted back to South Africa, and all South Africans that are in Nigeria must go back to South Africa. I think it's a reaction that is fair for a normal human being. When you see your brothers that they are threatened, you have to say so. But we are here to call for calm as student leadership from South Africa. We are here to call for harmony, for peace, and we are here to say that the relations that are there between Nigeria and South Africa are important determinant on how to move forward, because the history of Africa is a history of the liberation struggle. Nigeria played a role for the liberation of South Africa. I can tell you a lot of comrades from South Africa were housed here in Nigeria when things were very difficult in South Africa during the apartheid regime. The same way with Nigerian liberation history, you can track it back to many African countries that has contributed for Nigeria to be free. So that history is a very important history that must take us forward to say we are good as united as a people. We must work together despite our differences. I want to tell you one thing about the uniqueness of South Africa and Nigeria, is that we are in Lagos, the fastest growing city with the fastest growing economy, the same way with Johannesburg is the fastest growing economy and fastest growing city in the SADC region. So Nigeria provides leadership in terms of economic issues in this region. South Africa also provides leadership in terms of economic issues in the southern part of Africa. And that relationship assists Africa to grow, because that is the stepping stone in terms of GDP contribution and economic productivity and also job creation for the people. So I want to say to you that in South Africa, where I am studying, I have got a lot of lecturers that are teaching me that are from Nigeria, very good academics who are teaching us. We have good relations with them. We never had a problem with them. In fact, they are part of the important top academics that are contributing for the academic project to move forward. So as student leadership, we want to say here that we appreciate the contribution that Nigeria is doing for the academic productivity and the academic work, research output. I can tell you that if you go to University of Forte, the top law lecturers are from Nigeria. I know them. I wish I could mention a lot of names, Professor Osode and many others that are from here. And one thing that we always feel threatened is that if they are to leave lecturing, we are going to lose the top cream of academics. So we want to say these relations are very good. We need to build them together. I have a problem with how people politicize crime. Criminal activities, when they happen in any African countries, people always want to blame foreigners. If you see anything that happen everywhere you go, they always want to say it's foreign nationals that are doing this. The issue of counterfeit products, which led to what happened, is a big issue that I want to talk about. That it's wrong for police to think that if they are counterfeit products, it's only foreign nationals. But you will never see them at Chinese malls evicting Chinese, raiding Chinese, because there are a lot of Chinese malls where products that are counterfeits are produced and they are sold. Why you have never seen police confronting Chinese, but they always want to confront and allege that it's fellow Africans. So it's wrong, and we want to condemn it here, and we want to say the government is in diplomatic talks, the government of South Africa and the government of Nigeria, and the issue is being handled, and I would not want our fellow student leaders to continue pushing the agenda that South Africans that are staying here must be evicted. I want harmony and peace.
Okay. Another case comes to mind, and we're going to treat this case by case basis. There was a case of a Nigerian student, Tayo Faniron, in South Africa, that was pushed around by police. Let's just see this video. I want you to see it, and I want you to make due reactions to it.
From like the first 10 seconds of that video that day, I was unconscious. Everything I was saying, I didn't know anymore because the officer had already promised me that I was going to see hell, you know. So I was just trying to do that because that was the only thing that came to mind to protect myself.
Tayo Faniron, a former housemate of the Big Brother Africa reality TV show, narrates his ordeal in the hands of South African police officers. The singer and model becomes the latest victim of a string of xenophobic attacks on Nigerians in South Africa. Nigerian authorities got wind of the story after a live Instagram post that went viral.
It's a shame that in the 21st century we're talking about Africans killing Africans, rather than talking about Africans going to the moon, doing inventions, taking over the world. This cannot be allowed to happen.
The attack comes nearly 2 months after another Nigerian, Elizabeth Chukwu, a deputy director of the Chartered Insurance Institute of Nigeria, was killed in a hotel room. Her death brings the number of Nigerians killed since 2016 under similar circumstances to 88. This has drawn the wrath of Nigerian students who say enough is enough. Their last option, they say, is a retaliation on South African businesses and their citizens in Nigeria.
We have seen the helplessness of South African government, especially one that we can refer to as spiral silence, complete endorsement of the killing of Nigerians, which you agree with me to the extent that not a single person had been arrested or prosecuted by the government of South Africa.
However, the victim, who has lived in South Africa for 11 years, is embarking on a mission to change this narrative. He cautions against any backlash.
Yorubas will say, it means if you have a headache, you won't cut off your head, you know. We love South Africa. They are one of us. Instead of breaking the bridge, we will instead give them reasons to love us.
Meanwhile, assault charges have been instituted against the police officers, and the South African government has been petitioned over the attack.
At this stage, we can still let diplomacy work. We are not accepting killings of our brothers and sisters in South Africa, but we want them to investigate those they are investigating and come to conclusions. But we do not think that the solution is closing down businesses here.
As these attacks continue to resurface, the question these youths are asking is, will this diplomatic channel by the Nigerian government and the campaign by Tayo Faniron put an end to xenophobic attacks on Nigerians in South Africa? Egosa Igumbo, Arise News.
Right, so that's the video there. That culminated my question. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, look, we have a problem with how police handle issues. And I have always said it that our fight and our struggle as students is a struggle to ensure that the police system is professionalized to know how to handle people, because even if someone has committed something, you don't have a right as police to abuse that person. The court of law must determine whether someone has committed a crime or not. Your duty as a police to arrest in a proper way, without manhandling, without abusing, without victimizing people. Remember, we are coming from a struggle called the Fees Must Fall struggle, which we were leading from the front. And the police were brutalizing all of us. There are many of our comrades here, more than 600 comrades who were arrested during the FISMAS4. Majority of them being South African-born nationals who were arrested during the FISMAS4. The police will brutalize, the police will dehumanize our comrades in that struggle. So they don't treat only Nigerians, or they treat even South Africans unfairly when there's a struggle that we're waging.
So I want you to come in here and, you know, I saw you, I want you to react to this because this is quite a big issue here.
No, look, our issues with the South African state in its entirety are a problem. There are issues of IP. There's an institution called IP that looks into the investigation of how the police conduct themselves in South Africa. And there are many cases. There's many cases of myself in South Africa where have been manhandled improperly by the South African police. But we need to call for calm in this type of a situation. There are many Nigerians living in South Africa, and there are many South Africans living in Nigeria. And we need to treat the situation with caution. In the university sectors, we've tried to manage the relations. There's no South African students that is hunting down any Nigerian students. But in the broader society where there's trading and so on and so forth, there are clashes. If you look at the recent clashes, it was the South African police looking for permits, and there was a whole lot of issues that were going on there in terms of wanting that every business must have permits. And then that is what has caused the recent clash. But we need to regulate it in a manner that would assist all of us. The Nigerian government, the South African government, I know that the president of Nigeria and the president of South Africa are in talks. And those are some of the discussions and the discourse that we need to continue with in order to ensure that there's peace, calm, and stability. We can't be persecuting African brothers. We can't be persecuting each other. We've got the West that we must focus on. We've got the capitalist system that we must try and reduce its impact on Africa. I think that should be the start. We've been trying to make a communication with NANS so that we can have a meeting, but we got information that they're not from this province or the state of Nigeria. So we just want to have a meeting with them and say, how then do we speak?
You're talking to them. I'm sure NANS members are watching this and they would like to engage. What would you like to say to National Association of Nigerian student members, you know, and the executive that are listening to you now? You are the president of the South African Student Union, all union of all the universities in South Africa. What would you like to say to your Nigerian counterparts listening to you now to be able to douse this tension?
Yeah, no, I want to say to them, comrades, we need to talk. We need to sit down and have a conversation. Every solution that we must seek to get, it can only come from a conversation. It cannot come from a conflict. It can't be that when we fight against imperialists, we see ourselves fighting against ourselves as Africans. It would defeat the purpose and it will compromise the real struggle against exploitation of African resources by imperialists, which we are trying to wage. So we are saying, we are here, comrades, we can meet with you, we are available to meet with you before we leave Nigeria, so that we can have a conversation and have an insight. I do not think that all South Africans are xenophobic. If South Africans were xenophobic, they were not going to elect me to be president because I was born in Zimbabwe. But South Africans elected me to lead, and I am leading all students in South Africa.
We'll go on a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk more about that, Mr. Mugabe. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News. We still have with us in the studio Misheck Mugabe, President, South African Union of Students, and Lwandrie Mtsolo, Secretary General, South African Union of Students. Thank you so much for staying with us, gentlemen. There's a school of thought that this racial intolerance, xenophobic attacks in South Africa is further perpetrated by political illiteracy on the part of young South Africans with regards to the role African countries, especially Nigeria, played, the decisive role Nigeria played in the liberation of South Africa concerning apartheid. Do you share that thought?
Yeah, look, the issue of xenophobia, we condemn it with all the strongest terms. We don't want xenophobia, we don't want Afrophobia, we want peace and harmony, Africans to work together and love one another. That is what is more important, because one of the problems we have is that colonization, it destabilized even our thinking, such that you respect more of people who are from Europe than your African brothers. That is a reality when you go out there, that the Chinese, the Europeans, they are treated with kids' gloves. They are called tourists. If I'm an African, I'm called a foreigner. So that mentality, we need to deal with that because it's part of what perpetrates xenophobia. When you go and study in South Africa, you find out that some of the people will ask you in some corners that, are there no universities in your country? So those are xenophobic tendencies that you find. If you go to Cairo, you must be welcome. People must not ask you, why are you there? Because you're an African. So the 1884 Berlin Conference, it inflicted the pain in Africa, which is difficult to deal with today. It created boundaries and partitioned Africa into pieces. So these boundaries, they are causing a lot of harm today. You know why? Let me tell you that the divisions that we have in Africa, and for us to resolve them, we need to continue with the decolonization project, to decolonize Africa. That's why today we are here for an African Union conversation on free movement of persons in Africa. Why are we discussing that? Because even students, it's difficult to get a visa and go and study in another country. It's difficult for you to move and do research. If I want to go and do research in Tanzania, for example, it's very difficult to get a visa and go and do research there, even if I want to go and collect data for my research. Why is it so difficult? It's because colonization inflicted too much pain. So how do we move forward as Africans? We need political education. First, to conscientize our people that we are one. We need to work together. We need to be united. Because even my fellow counterparts here, the National Students Union of Nigeria, they are saying that all companies from South Africa must close here. I understand their pain. But the companies are also creating jobs. The same way the companies that are from Nigeria, that are in South Africa, they are creating millions of jobs. So if we say a company must close and shut down, we are trying to say there are people who must not get jobs because there are people who are working in those companies, millions of people. So we need to have a way of moving forward in a way that assists us to understand that we're Africans together, we need to work together.
And in moving forward, Mr. Mtsolo, let me come to you. We have to remember the past, history. And I want to get your thoughts on my question to Mr. Mugabe there. Is it lack of political education, lack of history on the part of the young South African? Is there enough being done to educate South Africans that these attacks have consequences on relations with countries and even the economy of South Africa?
No, look, I think generally in society, not only in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, there's political empathy. People have lost the niche of politics. Young people are no longer involved in the political space. And this has caused a deterioration in terms of our politics, our diplomatic relations, and so on and so forth. But we need to understand, President Thabo Mbeki once spent time here. There are many MK soldiers that fought for the liberation of South Africa that were trained here in Nigeria, especially here in Lagos. Some South Africans lived here in Lagos in the 70s, 80s, and even in the early 90s. And we need to ensure that we teach not only South Africans, but the entire Africa on the history of Africa. The history of Africa, if you want to get a history of Africa, it's written by white people. We need to go back, revise curriculum content in all of our universities, not only in South Africa, in the entirety of Africa, so that we know exactly what happened, so that we have a sense of pride as Africans. Yes, there's a lack of political education that lacks now because everybody's busy with social media and so on and so forth. So there's not really people that are actively involved in the struggle. But we need to change the narrative and we need to speak on what would assist Africa, on the importance of free movement. Why is it important that we are able to move around in Africa without having visas? You know, when I came to Nigeria, it's difficult to get to Nigeria. It's not easy. Even when you are accredited by the African Union, it's still difficult. And that's the case with all African countries. It creates some sort of fear. You know, some people are saying, "How are you going to Nigeria when there's tensions?" I said, "No. Nigerian people are our people. Our people have been living in Nigeria way before. So there must be no fear of us coming to visit Nigeria. And there must be no fear of Nigerians going to South Africa."
And I want to come in and ask this question. You know, it's amazing, and I'm really, really happy that the comrades didn't just come here, but they were the members of Umuko Wesizwe, you know, the armed wing of the ANC. And, you know, we're talking about how a lot of armed organization and covert operations were going on in here, shipping out to South Africa. But it is shocking that these same people, members of the Umuko Wesizwe, now use xenophobia to political advantage during the political season. I mean, the top prominent politician was caught on television in South Africa campaigning about the fact that, oh, these Nigerians are taking your job, these people are taking your jobs. And these persons had very strong affiliations with other movements of the ANC. I mean, how do we stop things like that? Usually for quick political gains because they want to beat the DA and Helen Zeller and people like that. How do you stop that?
Yeah. Look, we have a problem here. One of the problems that we have is that our politicians are losing it because they are the ones who spark sometimes these incidents because of the comments they make publicly. Because when you're a leader, you need to be careful of the words that you use because people that follows you are likely to react. So I think that, because I don't want also to discredit the role the MK played in the struggle. The Mkondowesi's were played a very critical role in the continent, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Mozambique, Nigeria, everywhere, trying to ensure that Africa is liberated from the colonial regime. But there are few individuals, of course, who always act in a way that we must condemn even today. They must always try to be exemplary to the people so that when people are about to do something, they must know that this is not what represents what our leaders believe in. So leaders must first of all be exemplary on what they do and how they act. So when we go back to South Africa, we are going to make a call to the Minister of Police. But Minister, the police must treat people equally. Crime is crime despite who committed it. If it's a South African who is committing a crime, or a Nigerian or a Zimbabwean, the people must be treated equally. You can't, when there's an incident, you must quickly say it's a Nigerian who has done this incident. You see, you need to ensure that people are treated equally, and it's one of the things that we are going to do as student leadership, because we are leading a constituency, we have a responsibility to do something when there is something that is not happening properly.
Because a lot of us in Nigeria still feel very sad at the killing of Lucky Dube, and it was said that they thought Lucky Dube was a Nigerian. That was what the carjackers said when they were arrested. I mean, that feels gory to us that that's MK member state in 1004 estate. I mean, in the transit camp of 1004 estate close to us here. What's like that?
I think you know, the crime rates in South Africa are high. Not just xenophobic crimes only. The crime stats in South Africa are appalling. You know, if you go to Cape Town, you know, Cape Town is a beautiful city, my brother, but it's the murder rate of Africa. It has got the largest number of murderers. So we've got a general problem of crime. And people want to use crime and pack it with their xenophobic nuisances that they own. It's not proper to kill anyone in the land, and that is the teaching that we must be able to bring out to people. And by the way, Nigerians are not the largest foreign nationals in South Africa. Zimbabweans are. Yeah. In 2008, there was approximately 408 million Zimbabweans living in South Africa, undocumented. Now, if we were to deal with all of it, we must pack it. You know, we've got Pakistanis living in the rural areas, running shops in South Africa. So it's not a Nigerian issue. It's an issue that the Home Affairs Ministry and the AU and all those that are involved need to deal with it thoroughly. Yes, it's a security threat to live in another country without proper papers, but there needs to be a manner that is dealt with that is humane to deal with security and also to deal with ensuring that we end xenophobia. We live. I studied at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Through my undergraduate degree, foreign nationals that were teaching me were like 40% of all my lecturers.
The likes of Professor Bridge Maharaj?
Yes, many, my brother, many who have contributed to the academia of South Africa, the research output of South Africa, who have done exceptionally well from other countries, Eritrea, Ghana, Zimbabwe, Djibouti. So, and that free movement, I mean, we are here for the AU, for the free movement conference. That is what we should encourage, that people must be able to move around in different countries without necessarily having issues.
Indeed, because speaking about Pan-Africanism and the free movement on the continent, The continuous xenophobic attacks will make a caricature of all of that. If you cannot, ensure, guarantee safety of your fellow black citizens in your country, then the whole idea of Pan-Africanism and free movement into any country on the continent then becomes a mockery. But since you're in Nigeria, your first time, I just want to ask you how your experience has been so far. Have you had our jollof rice?
Yeah. Look, when we arrived at the border, we were treated very well. We did not stay more than 10 minutes. We had crossed. The environment is very fine, and we are treated very well. In fact, our African leaders has taught us, and we need to learn from them. If you know, Nelson Mandela was married to Graça Machel from Mozambique. President Robert Mugabe was married to Sali from Ghana. So intermarriages which our leaders were practicing was to show us that we must be together, we are one people. We
must be together. We have to go very quickly. Any interesting dishes you've had, memorable?
There's something called plantain.
It's
like a banana and the pepper chicken.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
So I wanted to say, as the South African Union of Students, we condemn xenophobic and we want Africa to be united.
Okay.